I don't get it. The comments on these Contra Rogue Corps trailers, it's just like, have these people even played a Contra game in the past 10 years? What's up, guys? I'm here today to talk to you about Contra Rogue Corps. I'm going to be calling it Rogue Corps. I know that Corpse is wrong. I am intentionally calling it Corpse because I find it fun. I don't know. People get on this with me all the time. They say, oh, it's not Hard Corpse, it's not Rogue Corpse, it's Rogue Corps, it's Hardcore. I get it. I get the play on words. I get Army Corps, Marine Corps, etc., etc. I still think it's fun to say Corpse. Today we're going to dig into Contra Rogue Corps. Is this a game that's going to be worth your money? Is this a game that the critics so far are right about? Well, the game's not out yet as of today's date, but it's coming out in about a month. And I'm personally really excited for it. So I did a little digging on this game and the people behind it, and I wanted to kind of shed some light on some stuff and maybe give some people who are kind of on the fence a reason, or 7 reasons, to consider buying it. So this is 7 reasons why I think you should reconsider or even consider checking out Contra Rogue Corps. 7 reasons why I think that it is not as bad as the public is making it out to be. So the first reason on my list is Nobuya Nakazato is the director on this game. So if you don't know who he is, let me fill you in. He has worked on the Contra series since Contra the Alien Wars. So he is a long-time Konami employee. And I guess you could consider him like the Koji Igarashi of the Contra world, if you will. Now, with that said, a lot of people may not have known that, and a lot of people may be thinking, oh, this is just Konami throwing money at something that they have no clue how to make. I think a lot of the backlash from them screwing up Castlevania, from them screwing up the stuff with Metal Gear, with Hideo Kojima, with them basically turning their backs in a way on gamers, has really kind of soured anything Konami. And it's a shame because Konami, for the past few years at least, has been trying to put out content that I think is a step in the right direction. Not necessarily, you know, the best, but it's a step in the right direction. They've got the Castlevania and Contra collections, which included, even though they were digital only, they included some really cool extra content along with the extra regions from the Japanese region, which was really cool. And then on top of that, you've got a game like Super Bomberman R, which came out, which they own the Hudson Soft licenses, and that got really good reviews as well. So that's kind of, you know, a step in the right direction in my opinion. But I think that them going with Nobuya Nakazato on this is the right move, and I think that he has worked on all the big name Contra games, or he's had a hand in all the big Contra names games, as well as stuff like Castlevania Symphony of the Night. He was one of the artists on that game as well, and Rocket Knight Adventures too, as well. Rocket Knight Adventures, not Rocket Knight Adventures, the sequel, which is Sparkster, which, whatever, now we're getting carried away. But my point is, he's worked on Alien Wars, he's worked on Hard Corps, he's worked on Shattered Soldier, he's worked on Neo Contra. I believe he also had a hand helping out M2 with Contra Rebirth on the Wii Virtual Console or the WiiWare. So I really do feel like it's a step in the right direction to put this guy in the path that Contra's headed down towards. Another reason why I think that this game is going to do what it should be doing for a Contra game is it's going to have throwback enemies and nods to the original franchise. One of the problems that Castlevania had when Lords of Shadow came out was it didn't tie enough into the original timeline. It was a completely separate timeline and a totally different story, and it had maybe 1 or 2 throwback songs in it, but overall it was a brand new experience, a brand new take on it, and it played less like Contra and more like God of War. Now, the thing is, this game that they're coming out with, this Contra Rogue Corps, it plays like Neo Contra. So it has that, the one thing I will say is that Neo Contra was kind of headed down this path with the twin stick shooter style. It didn't have that, if I recall. I think it was, you would move your analog stick in the direction that you're going to go in, and then you would shoot with whatever button you're holding down. And if I recall, you could switch between 3 different weapons. Yeah, that was Neo Contra. Personally, I really liked Neo Contra. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was different for the series, for sure. But, you know, I feel like them going in the same direction constantly, you gotta try stuff to keep the series invigorated. You try to put a 2D Contra game in the faces of kids nowadays, and they're gonna be like, what is this? You know, games like Blazing Chrome that recently came out, that's a love letter to Contra, and there's been plenty of love letters to the Contra series over the years, and a lot of them were great. Blazing Chrome I've heard nothing but great things about. I haven't played it yet, but to me that's a love letter to the Alien Wars. It's not doing anything new technically, so to speak. Now again, don't knock it because I haven't played Blazing Chrome, but I'm just trying to look at this in a different perspective. I'm trying to look at it with an open mind, and I feel like I can do that a little bit more with Contra because the games have, for the most part, always changed. They've always been different. Castlevania, I think, is a little different. Castlevania has always been, like, for the most part, 2D. It never really changed. It did have some 3D games, which I enjoyed when they tried to change that up, and a lot of people didn't like that, but those games were viewed, for the most part, pretty positively. And on top of that, a lot of those 3D games got a very low budget, so you got to kind of consider that as well. And I bet that this game's kind of the same thing. A lot of people are complaining about the graphics. I personally don't care about the graphics. I think that they look fine. I don't really have an issue with them personally. I mean, I grew up in the NES era. I grew up playing the original Contra. I grew up playing Contra Alien Wars. Those games looked good for their time. This game still looks good. It's just, it does look a little dated, but who cares? Again, you gotta factor in, you know that Konami is probably not sinking a ton of money into this project. Why? Because it's an old franchise that's 30 plus years old, and they don't want to spend that kind of money on it. Now, if they did, would they have the kind of money to sit there and say, hey, let's take a chance, let's make a 2D brand new Contra game that's just exactly like the old school ones? They did that already. They did that with Rebirth, and I'm almost positive that game did not sell as well as you would think it would. This new game is going after a different market. It's still trying to bring in some of the old school fans, but it's pretty clear that they're going in a direction that's more in line with the appropriate evolution of what Neo Contra is. So regarding throwback enemies and nods to the franchise, the director has promised that there's going to be throwback enemies. If you look in the trailer, you'll see that there's like that giant skeleton looking thing, which looks right out of like an old school Contra game. And you're going to see a lot of the character design that looks a lot like the old school stuff. There's also going to be some throwback t-shirts and stuff, which I believe you can get with like a season pass DLC, which they're doing like different costumes and stuff like that. There's not going to be any microtransactions in this game, so it's not going to be one of those types of games like what's it called? Fortnite. Yeah, Fortnite or Overwatch or any of that stuff. This is just simply a twin stick shooter that has some additional multiplayer modes, and it's what you're paying for is what you get. Do I think the price point's a little high? Yeah, maybe? I don't know. I could see myself paying $39.99 for this. I could see myself paying $59.99 for this. It really depends on how much content they're going to offer. And that's the big thing for me. If this is going to be a game that I'm going to blow through in 2 hours, then yeah, no, it's not worth $50. But if this is going to be a game that I'm going to come back to over and over and over again, I think that it's going to be worthwhile. So, now the thing is, Contra has kind of taken a path down this road. We've seen the series evolve and get goofier and wackier and stranger. I mean, take a look at the previous games. From Contra 3 The Alien Wars to Contra Hard Corps, you know, you've got these games that are still very much 2D experiences, but have larger than life bosses, crazy aliens, but also like a lot of like Terminator-esque elements as well. You've got in Hard Corps, you've got characters that you play as. You've got the guy Ray and the girl Shayna? I can't remember her name. And then you've got the werewolf character and then Brownie. I don't know why Ray and Brownie are the only two characters that I can remember their names. Brownie is a little tiny robot dude that you could play as. So already you can kind of see the shift into these like different wacky, weird characters. And so then moving on from that, you've got Contra Shattered Soldier, which is kind of a return to form, more like the Alien Wars, where you've got just Bill Reiser, and then you've got Lucia that you're playing as, the female android or robot. And then from there you go into Neo Contra and also Contra Rebirth, which both of those games featured Bill Reiser, if I recall, and then Jaguar, I think his name is? No, Jaguar was in Neo Contra, who basically looked like Sam Jackson, like Samuel L. Jackson, but like jacked, like super jacked, and had like this red like armor on, like a badass samurai sort of thing, kind of like an Afro samurai, you know, like the character. So he looked really cool, and he played great. Like that game is a lot of fun, Neo Contra. And then you've got Contra Rebirth, which had a bunch of wacky characters. You had like a salamander character, and then you had another like little female robot who was kind of like Brownie a little bit, sort of. And then you had, I want to say Jaguar again, but I feel like I'm wrong. It's been a really long time since I've sat down and played Contra Rebirth. And then of course Bill Reiser again. So this game takes place in between the Alien Wars and I believe Contra Hard Corps, where it takes place like 6 months after Contra 3 Alien Wars, and you're playing as what looks to be almost like Suicide Squad style characters. You know, they look to be a little bit more rough and tough, a little bit more like bad people, so to speak, or like badasses. So you've got a cybernetic panda bear. You've got a giant bug guy named Gentleman. You've got a girl named like Miss Hirakiri or something like that, who has like a stomach, they call it the gut buster or something like that, where like she's got an alien in her stomach or something like that that attacks people. And then you've got the guy Kaiser, who has like a drill on one of his arms. So I feel like the visual design and aesthetic of this game of Rogue Corps is definitely falling in line with Neo Contra. It is a continuation of Shattered Soldier. I mean, you gotta think of it like this. If you played Shattered Soldier or you played Neo Contra, this fits right in line with those games. I mean, in those games, there was an enemy where you would, like for Shattered Soldier, there was an enemy that after you defeated it, it would fall onto a conveyor belt and then get grinded up in a meat grinder, and then whatever was left over would get funneled into a pit in the next room that you entered into, and that was being eaten by one of the next bad guy that you had to fight. Like, that's ridiculous, but so cool and crazy. And that's the kind of stuff that makes Contra Contra. On top of that, you were like grabbing hold of missiles and then spinning on missiles, like in Shattered Soldier. You were on snowboards that were cascading down the mountain as you were shooting all over the place and being chased by this giant like worm monster. Neo Contra, kind of very similar. You were running on helicopter blades, literally running on helicopter blades. So I don't know, guys, like, seeing the continuation of that with Rogue Corps, they've clearly turned up the dial on the wackiness, and I feel like it fits. A lot of people are saying it doesn't fit, or it doesn't look like Contra. How does this not look like Contra? Because it's not 2D side-scrolling? I don't know. That's just my opinion. I think that's a little silly. So I feel like this is an appropriate evolution for the series. Now, along the topic of throwback stuff for Contra, there was an artist, I believe his name is Tom Dubois, and he did art for tons of retro Konami games. He recently did the Bloodstained Curse of the Moon box art, alternate box art for limited run games, which you could probably watch in my unboxing, which you'll see. So Mr. Dubois is a really great artist, and he's designed a new alternative reverse cover art for this game, which you could check out right here. I'm going to show it on the screen. That looks fan-freaking-tastic, and I don't know, that just is a huge selling point for me. I love the throwback art with that, and that's a big part of why I want to get this game. That the packaging alone is super, super cool. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about the developer history and possibly the potential composer, and why I think that that is another selling point and another reason why you should give this game a chance. So a lot of people are saying, oh, I'm not buying this game because Konami's making it. Konami's not making it, actually. They're just publishing it. The company that they've hired to make this game, they've hired a third-party company who has been in the business for quite some time. But they are still kind of somewhat new. And the name of the company is called Toy Logic. And so they essentially took Nobuya Nakazato and said, hey, we want you to work with this company, Toy Logic, to make this game. So you're probably wondering, I've never heard of that development company before. What is Toy Logic? Well, Toy Logic has done a number of different games that they've kind of worked on in addition with other companies. So stuff like Super Smash Bros. Brawl, they did the TMNT Smash Up game, they worked on that. Kid Icarus Uprising, which aside from the horrendous controls on that game, like basically making it unplayable, the presentation, the art, the music, the voice acting, all incredible. And the gameplay itself, great. Just those controls were horrendous. It could have been one of the best games on the 3DS, but instead it was just such a letdown for me personally. But aside from that, everything else about the game was great, so it's worth noting that. They also did a game called Happy Wars, as well as Happy Dungeons, which were like, I think, like multiplayer focused, which, you know, again, that could fit in with this new Contra game. They also worked on The Evil Within, and they did some work on that, and in addition to that, they helped with the 3DS version of Dragon Quest XI. So yeah, they basically helped convert it to the 3DS, which is no small matter, so they did a great job with that. Now, with that information, knowing that, it's worth noting that musically, this game has the potential to be done by Takehiro Nishi. So if you're interested in the music, or you're like, oh, well, the music that they used in the trailer was just like one of those songs, you know, like that all these companies are doing, where they just throw in a random 80s or 70s song, which they did with this. They did We're Not Gonna Take It by Twisted Sister. And I guarantee you that song is most likely not going to be in that game. It's just not Contra style. I really don't expect that. I feel like that was just one of those things where they're like, oh, let's just throw an old song in just to, you know, kind of wake people up. So that's why they did it. Why? No clue, but that's my guess. But this composer, Takehiro Nishi, who I think is working on the soundtrack. I don't know, they haven't announced it, but he works for Toy Logic, and he's done stuff like Sylphid way back in the day on 1993 on the Sega CD. He had helped out with music for that. Lunar Eternal Blue, he was a sound engineer on. Gun Griffin, in 1996. He did sound treatments and strategies. He worked on Grandia 2 and Grandia 3, where he was the sound director, and he did compositions or arrangements for Super Smash Bros. Brawl. He also was the composer on the TMNT Smash Up game, and he also did composition for Kid Icarus Uprising, which had a phenomenal soundtrack. So another thing that I can point out is that there was a new trailer that came out fairly recently for the Rogue Corps official PvP Carnage trailer, which you're watching right now. This introduced some additional new modes into this game. So there's additional modes. There's PvP Carnage League and Rage mode, which is included as multiplayer modes. Now, to me, that seems like they're kind of grabbing at the Fortnite crowd a little bit, but again, I don't think it's going to be the same. I think it's going to be Contra's take on a more modern looking experience and modern looking game. You know, a lot of game companies look at what is big and what is popular, and they try to maybe sprinkle a bit of that on there. All companies are kind of guilty of this, even companies like Nintendo that threw in a multiplayer mode on Metroid Prime 2 Echoes when there was absolutely no reason to do so. So they did that because multiplayer was huge and Halo was big at the time, and they just wanted to, you know, kind of throw something in at the last minute to appease those people. So this PvP Carnage League and Rage mode, they look like they're a lot of fun. They're a little, really goofy with friends. But yeah, so that's the sixth reason as to why I think that this game is much better than people say it's going to be. But here's my seventh, okay? Looking at all this and the history of the series, along with the trailers that have been released, and knowing that they're trying to go for something new, I would say the seventh reason is just to support the series. And I hate being the type of person who's like, oh, let's just blindly buy something even though it's not good. The thing is, this looks good to me. Now, to you, it might not, and I'd love to know your feelings on this, what you think. Of course, keep the comments constructive and critical, but what do you think about the graphics? What do you think about the gameplay so far for what you've seen? Do you think that them going with this newer kind of style or aesthetic is going to work for the series, at least for the meantime? Do you feel like maybe supporting this game will get more interesting Contra and maybe get some more classic looking games back to the series? I'm very curious on what everyone thinks on this topic. Leave a comment down below, and that's about it. I think I'm gonna go play some Contra. I'm kind of in the mood now, so it's gonna be a little bit of a wait. Like I said, a little bit of about a couple weeks, but I think it's going to be worth it overall. So we'll see what happens in a month.